What did you want to be when you grew up?
My whole life, I wanted to be two things. From the time I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a physics professor. I love physics. I love cosmology. I love general relativity theory. And I wanted to be a journalist. When I was a kid, journalists were public intellectuals. There were people around like Norman Mailer and Gay Talese and Hunter S. Thompson. And these people wrote very important books on social issues like the space program or women's rights or Vietnam. And I thought to myself, these guys are really important and they have to think a lot and they get invited to cool parties and they have big fights with people and they write important books. And boy, it looked like a lot of fun to me. And I went to college and studied physics straight ahead for 2 years and discovered I was okay, but not amazing at it. I was good, but not great. And decided that I wanted to try to be a journalist. And I worked for my father for a number of years in the 1970s in real estate. My father ended up teaching at the Wharton School part-time as an adjunct. In the mid-1980s, he and I wrote a book on real estate fundamentals. That was the course. By sheer dumb luck, the book, published by John Wiley, came out in 1989. The month CNBC went on the air, one of my friends got one of the first producer jobs. They had me on as a guest on real estate, and they basically hired me in 1990 to be the real estate correspondent. And I was the real estate correspondent from 1990 to 96 and became the stocks correspondent in 97. So my father always used to joke, I didn't want to go into the real estate business with him. I thought that was not very interesting. And we ended up writing a book on real estate, and I ended up getting a job as a real estate journalist. So my father always used to say, I didn't do so bad by you, Robert. You didn't want to be in real estate. You ended up getting hired as real estate journalist in 1990, and you parlayed it into a whole career from there.
How did you transition to the trading world?
It was not easy. I got the job at CNBC because they were just starting. Literally, I'm the last person still on the air from the first year hired, and they were still trying to figure out what they wanted to be. They were slowly moving towards the stock market network, but they were a lot broader at that time. This was all before the internet explosion in the mid-1990s. And it was an easy hire for them because they needed someone to cover real estate. They didn't have anyone. And I always used to say to them that they needed to hire me because 50 or 60% of the country owns real estate, and only a much smaller percentage owns stocks, and you don't have anybody covering the real estate. And so I got that job based on that need. They needed someone there. When I saw in 1995 what changed us all was the internet. And Netscape went public in August 95, as I recall, and that changed everything. All of a sudden, the world exploded. We got ratings that we never had before. We had ratings because the internet was investable. This thing called Netscape existed. We got ratings because all of a sudden you could buy stocks online. These were the first programs in the mid-1990s. You could buy from your home computer. It was slow. It took 20 minutes for a confirmation, and you had to type in things, but you could do it. And there was a TV station called CNBC that you could watch, and people were talking about this. So that combination of three things, CNBC, being able to invest online from home, and to have a shiny new object to invest in, the internet, and in this case, Netscape as one of the first ones, that kind of changed everything for us. So I saw that, and I was still the real estate correspondent in the middle of 95. I said, boy, we're getting ratings, and we're not getting ratings because I'm the real estate correspondent. We're getting ratings because the internet. And I said, I want to do that. And I went to my bosses and made arguments for it. And eventually in the summer of 1997, I became on air. At that time, it was called on-air stocks correspondent. And I've essentially been here ever since.
What is your book about?
When you've been somewhere for 35 years, you feel the need to say something about what you've learned. I mean, you're not just a potted plant down here. You might be reporting all day on what people are saying and thinking, but you develop opinions, particularly about what's worth listening to, what's not worth listening to, what kind of things, investments might be worthwhile, which are not worthwhile. How do you approach it? How do you decide when to get in and out of things? I wanted to say something about that. And I also wanted to say what it was like to be on the floor. I always say, what would you do if you could meet all of your heroes? If you could meet all the people you ever admired, if you could meet every rock star, king or queen, movie star, whatever. I've met literally thousands of people. And the vast majority are delightful. It's true, a small percentage. There's an old saw in our business, John, that never meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed. It's a little cynical. I generally find that not to be true, but it occasionally is. But the point is, what would you give to meet all your heroes? So I wanted to describe that.
What was it like to have celebrities on the floor?
Robert Downey was very instructive because it highlights a problem with how do you get somebody to say something that doesn't want to say anything. So Robert Downey came down to promote the new Iron Man movie. I think it was 2 or 3. This was 12 years ago or something. And what has happened to movie stars, it used to be very easy to interview movie stars. They come down, they ring the bell, you walk right by you, you're standing on the floor with the wireless, say hi to the fans at CNBC, we love you, say something, and they'd say something kind of nice, rambling, not terribly important, and everybody's happy. What's happened is these movies, particularly these superhero movies, became enormous properties. Iron Man 1 and 2, they grossed over $1 billion. So what happened was Marvel was bought by Disney. Disney now realized this was a major property, all these superhero movies. So what it used to be, the movie star drove the movie. And what happened was that got inverted. So it was essentially the franchise. Iron Man was more important than Robert Downey. And so the movie studios got very nervous about letting their stars suddenly start talking because who the hell knows what they're going to start talking about? Politics, sex, anything. And people like Robert Downey were famous for speaking their minds. So they didn't like suddenly having movie stars giving freewheeling interviews, even just saying hello to somebody for 3 minutes on CNBC. So they started restricting access. And the day before Downey was going to come ring the opening bell for the Iron Man movie, his PR people came by and said hello. And they said, hey, we're with Downey's people, and he's coming to ring the bell tomorrow. I said, it's great. I know. We're all very excited. Love to hear him. Love to see him. And he said, he's not going to talk to you. I said, oh, well, I'm just standing here. He's going to ring the bell, come down. Maybe he'll come by me and maybe he'll just say something. They said, no, he's not going to ring the bell. He's not talking to you or anybody else. He's just going to ring the bell. He's just going to walk out of the building. And that's it. Are we good on that? Now, this sounded like a little bit of a hustle to me, and I didn't like it. What I did was I went home, and I used to collect comic books in the 1960s, and I had the first Iron Man comic book, and I had the first Avengers comic book, and I came back, and next day, and there's Robert Downey, rings the bell, he comes down on the floor, I'm standing there, I got a wireless camera, I got a mic, the cameraman behind me, and they had posted a guard in front of me to stop me from putting a microphone in his face. It was really annoying. And so as he's walking by me, I held up the first comic book, the first Iron Man. And over the guy, I yelled, hey, Robert, you know what this is? And I held it up. I was 6 feet away from him, and he stopped. And he said, wow, is that the first Iron Man comic? Because he actually knew that because he knew something about this. I said, it is, absolutely. Come on over here and say hello to everybody. And I got the interview. Nothing very earth-shattering. It's a few pleasant words about Iron Man, how happy he is. That's all anybody wanted, anyhow. So the interview's done. He walks away. His PR people come up to me and say, we told you weren't talking to Robert Downey. And I looked at them and I said, well, you told me, you didn't tell him. So the point of this story is, how do you get people to actually, and the way to do it is you find something they really care about. A lot of people, Aretha Franklin, for example, came and wanted to promote her Christmas Carol album. I knew she didn't care about that much. I knew she cared a lot more about her legacy. And I knew that she was interested in writing an autobiography and a biopic. And that's what I asked her about. And that's what she wanted to talk about. So and I want to talk about Barry Manilow, like the same thing, but find out what people really care about if you want to get people either interested in you or interested in hiring you or interested in getting an interview, getting them to say something. Go to the heart of what they're looking. In that case, I knew that comic book would get him to stop, or I made that assumption.
Do you have a favorite bell ringing?
Jimmy Page was the lead guitar player of Led Zeppelin, I'm an old rock and roller, big, very important guy in my generation. And in 2005 or so, Warner Music was going public. I would say that was a big deal. So people coming down, we're doing this, people who are in charge of Warner coming, Jimmy Page came with them. And instead of ring the bell, you press a red button on the stage. So instead of ringing the bell, the head of Warner Music rang the bell, but standing next to him was Jimmy Page, and he brought his guitar. And he started, before they ring the bell, he started playing Whole Lotta Love. Dun, 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 dun. You could still see this on the internet. Message Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, NYSE. And the whole floor erupted because there was all these old guys like me with these worn vinyl copies of Led Zeppelin 2 or 3 or whatever, eager to say hello to Jimmy Page and get an autograph. So everybody's screaming their heads off. And they ring the bell. And so the way you do this is you ring the bell and you go down the stairs on the podium. And there's at the bottom of the stairs, you can go 2 ways. If you take a left, you go out onto the floor. And if you take a right, there's a passageway that goes out onto Broad Street that goes right to a car. So you can either elect to come on the floor, say hello to people, or you can make a right and get out of town. So we come down. I'm waiting there for Jimmy Page, 150 guys with vinyl copies of Led Zeppelin albums, and the head of Warner Music comes down, and I say, "Hi, where's Jimmy?" And he said, "Jimmy took a right." So Jimmy Page left and decided that he didn't want to deal with the crowds. I was told that he doesn't like dealing with crowds, which is a little strange, and he didn't do it. But still, it was probably the most riotous cheering spontaneously that I'd ever seen. The other one that I really liked was Barry Manilow. Barry Manilow came and rang the closing bell, 12 or 13 years ago, and he was promoting a Broadway album. And I wasn't a big Barry Manilow fan, but he rang the bell, and there he was standing there. And we had done a brief interview with me. I didn't do it, but my colleague did. And he was just standing there kind of staring at the floor by himself. And this is one of those moments where, hey, there's Barry Manilow. I might as well say hello to him. So I said hello. And I said, I have a question. I understood you used to be a jingle writer. And he said, yeah, I was in the 70s. And I said, is it really true that you wrote the State Farm jingle, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there? He said, oh, yeah, I wrote that. I got paid $500 for that. And I'm very proud of it. I never bothered me that it became famous. And he said, I wrote a whole bunch of other things. I wrote the Band-Aid commercial. He started humming that. I'm thinking, this is kind of cool. Barry Manilow is like humming jingles for me, just by me, just alone. It's standing there on the floor. This is great. This is fun. And then I said, you just sold out the Nassau Coliseum. It's like 18,000 people, but you haven't had a big hit in ages. How do you do that? That's kind of amazing. Congratulations. And he said, well, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. What I did was I stuck with it. And I had a lot of hits in the 70s and 80s, and I didn't have as many big hits anymore, but I consistently made albums, and the fan base stayed with me. So yeah, you're right. All right, I didn't have so many hits, but I had a consistent fan base. And suddenly, if you stay with it long enough, suddenly people start writing stories saying you're a legend. And that's kind of what happened. And there was another little life lesson for Barry Manilow. He very much impressed me. I'm compressing what he said. We talked for about 15 minutes, but he said, look, stay with what you really like. Don't worry about whether or not you're getting greatest hits all the time. If you really love it, stay with it. And that was a sort of interesting life lesson. He was very content and sort of happy. And Barry Manilow has been an object of a lot of derision and laughter and ridicule over the years. But it doesn't seem to bother him. The guy has a very solid fan base. And look, he's still around. He was still touring. This was 12 years ago we were chatting.